All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashi, Bahasham Rakakwadash. Yahweh is the true, holy, and powerful name of the Heavenly Father. Bahasham, meaning in the name. Yahawashi is the true, holy, and powerful name of His only begotten Son, who is the Savior of the nation of Israel, starting off with the elect within the nation of Israel. And Israel consists of you so-called Negroes, Hispanics, and Native Americans, as well as you Israelite foreigners scattered abroad that may look like the nations where you've been scattered to, but are Israelites. And I also want to give double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations to the hope of the elect, pushing out this word in all sincerity and in truth. All right, this is the brother you call from the GMS branch out of Des Moines, Iowa, coming back at you with another lesson inspired by the Holy Spirit, Havrakakwadash. And this lesson is based off of the Elder Mathathi's lesson, the head of our camp out here in GMS Des Moines. As you see on the screen here is Hit the Button, pre-camp warm-up. You know, it was a heavy lesson in the spirit. And it was a precept, that he had quoted that I ended up going back to read, and it really sparked my spirit, and I began to, just meditate on the effort, the energy, starting off with Yahawashi and the sacrifice that he did for us so that we could have this understanding, all right, so that we could, so that we could obtain these promises and everything like that, and how him laying down his life was an example, all right, that he left for us to sacrifice and lay down our lives for one another. All right, and just as we're going to read Lord's will, I'm kind of short on time, so I'm going to try and keep it concise as possible through the Spirit, but we could read about the labor and the effort that our forefathers put in so that, that we could understand these words that they labored to interpret from generation to generation, while they were still dealing with different things in their personal lives. All right, I'm thinking about one example with King David, all right, when the ark was returned back. He was rejoicing, dancing before the Lord. All right, when you read it in Chronicles, he ordered the priests and he was delivering different psalms to him. All right, it's a great day in the spirit. You know what I'm saying? All right, and then he went to go bless his house. And when he went to go bless his house, after he did all that spiritual work, all that labor, all right, he came home to McCall talking shit to him. All right, one of his wives, man. Okay, but just putting that in perspective, to show that these are men in the flesh, all right, that we read about throughout the scriptures that had carnal situations they had to deal with, hell from their wives, or, dealing with, family or work, different shit in their, at their occupations throughout their different times, or labor and everything like that. But it didn't stop them from continuing to deliver this word. It didn't stop them from, King David from writing his Psalms, delivering that assured hope, making sacrifices. All right, and we see those same examples with our elders and apostles on down, man. All right, you hear about the different testimonies of, Elder Apostle Gabar, man, walking for hours, all right, to get to the school, all right, continually, man, all right, to get this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that we're able to benefit off of to this day. All right, the sacrifices of these men in their personal lives, all right, families that may have left them, all right, time that they were spending with the brothers to feed us and give us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Those were sacrifices that was made, all right, that we're benefiting off of, man. Okay, right? They showed an example, starting off with Yahawashi, all right, of laying down their lives, all right, for the rest of the believers. And with all that being said, all right, how are we gonna, what kind of attitude should we have now that we've gotten this word, all right? And what type of sacrifice should we be showing? Okay, we have to be mindful of what we're quitting a good term, man. All right, the same effort and labor, and this is one of the main points the elder was harping on. Look at that same effort and energy that was put into you so that you could receive this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, right? Well, where's that same energy back for the rest of the believers, man? All right, it says, teach this word unto faithful men who are able to teach others also, right? So I know I've been rambling. Let me just go ahead and get Psalm 16 and 1. It says, preserve me, O Yahweh, for in thee do I put my trust. O my soul, thou hast said unto the Lord, thou art my Lord, my goodness extendeth not to thee, but to the saints that are in the earth, right? So we can't do anything directly to the Lord. What do I mean by that? All right. Well, the sacrifices that we give, all right, through the Spirit, just like with the physical sacrifices that we had, all right, who benefited from those physical sacrifices when Jake, would bring the unblemished lamb and everything like that? The Lord has said that, look, I'm not eating of these sacrifices. The Levites are, okay? They're going to benefit from these sacrifices, right? And just applying it in the spirit. So the spiritual sacrifices that are being done It's to benefit one another, okay? So when you present your body as a living sacrifice in whatever way that it shows itself, all right, in your life and your daily decision making or whatever the case it may be, that's to the benefit of the next man, all right? That sacrifice could be, I'm tired as hell, but, I fought to get some extra reading in. All right, that gave me inspiration. That little extra reading I got in, that extra chapter gave me an inspiration for a lesson, or it gave me an understanding to where, I was able to counsel a brother in a situation. All right, or I could better understand something. So, and I was able to benefit somebody else by that understanding that I received, or whatever the case may be, right? Because at the end of the day, man, Yahawashi, man, he laid down his life for his friends, for the elect, okay? For the benefit of the rest of us. So that should be our mind frame, man. That's showing the love. It's sacrificing for one another, all right? Just as it was sacrifices made for you, all right? Labor that was done so that you could wake up and know that you're an Israelite, all right? So that you can know how to operate, okay, within this wicked world, so that you could be comforted, all right, from the hell and the shit that you're going through, all right? So that you could hear that lesson, that may have got you out of that low or that counsel, that helps you operate it in a certain way or get through that situation that you were dealing with, right? So that same energy should be given, all right, extended back. So it says, O my soul, thou hast said unto the Lord, thou art my Lord. My goodness extendeth not to thee, but to the saints that are in the earth, and to the excellent in whom is all my delight, right? So once again, the goodness that we do, all right, it benefits one another, because as it says in the book of Job, all right, this is the book of Job, chapter, Job 36. Oh, snap. Actually, I had it up. Job 35:6. It says, if thou sinnest, what doest thou against him? Or if thy transgressions be multiplied, what doest thou unto him? If thou be righteous, what givest thou him? Or what receiveth he of thine hand? Thy wickedness may hurt a man as thou art, and thy righteousness may profit the Son of Man, right? So, all right, whether you're wicked or righteous, you're only hurting the next man or you're benefiting the next man, okay? All right, because the Lord, he's fine, okay? That's another precept in the book of Psalms. He was like, shoot, if I was hungry, you think I would tell thee the earth is mine and the fullness thereof, all right? So once again, those sacrifices, it's for your fellow brother, right? So we have to understand this, man. This is about, like Yahawashi said, man, or like Paul said, man, I endure all things for the elect's sake. Okay, Yahawashi said he's doing what? He's going to gather his elect throughout the four corners. That's who he's concerned with. All right. So we want to have a mind of a love towards one another, and we show that love. All right, through what? Through sacrifices, man. All right, through laying down our lives. Right. I want to hit this in the book of 1 Corinthians. All right, yeah, I'm going to really have to speed through these, through the Spirit. All right, 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 15. It says, and I beseech you, brethren, ye know the house of Stephanus. Once you go into that word Stephanus, it says the crowned. All right. It says that it is the first fruits of Achaia, and that they have, Salakia. It says, and they have addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints. All right. They addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints in the NLT. You know that Stephanus and his household were the first of the harvest of believers in Greece, and they are spending their lives in service to the Most High's people. All right. Spending their lives in service to the Most High's people, man. Okay. So this is the energy that the Lord wants from us, man. All right. And I'm thinking about one of the churches that the Lord didn't rebuke, was didn't have anything negative to say to them, was the Church of Philadelphia. All right. You go into that word Philadelphia, it means what? Brotherly love, man. All right. And once again, that brotherly love is shown forth through sacrifice, man. So this is a very key component. All right. Being willing to sacrifice, lose comforts, or, whatever the case it may be for one another, man. This is the book of 1 Corinthians. All right. No, I'm sorry. Not 1 Corinthians, but 1 John. All right. This is 1 John chapter 3 and verse 16. It says, hereby perceive we the love of the Most High, because the love of Yahawashi, all right, because he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren, right? So Yahawashi did that. He laid down his life. He sacrificed, he gave up comforts. Okay. He was constantly teaching and everything like that, So, hey, we want to show the love. We have to show that love towards one another, man. All right. So this is the energy that, is expected of us, man. This is the book of 1 John. I read that 1 John 3. All right. I got a lot of precepts written down, but I just kind of got to scan through which ones. Through the Spirit. Let me hit this. All right. Let me hit this Maccabees, man, just to highlight the point of the effort and labor that was put in. And not only that effort and labor, I didn't even finish on that Psalms. All right. But they were glad to do it. Okay. It wasn't something done grudgingly. All right. The flesh is going to scoff, of course. We already know that at times. Not going to feel it, but that's what makes it a sacrifice. All right. Bro, this is bugged out. I can't type nothing. This ain't never happened. All right. I'm trying to hate. It's all good. All right. This is the book of Psalms. Oh, this is the Psalms I wanted. Yep. Psalms 40 and 8. Which this was quoted in the book of Hebrews, but this is Psalms 40, and I'll start at verse 6. Sacrifice and offering thou didst not desire. Mine ears hast thou opened. Burnt offering and sin offering hast thou not required. Right. So the Lord didn't want, the physical sacrifices. All right. He got tired of that process. All right. See, Jake was abusing that, the physical sacrifices, But what did the Lord require? It said a body. All right. In that Hebrews, that as Paula had quoted it, man, said a body has thou prepared for me, man. Going into what? Presenting ourselves as a living sacrifice, man. All right. And we show that mind frame through our decision making. All right. Looking towards the things of others more than ourselves. Right. But this is Psalms chapter 40 and verse 7. Then said I come in the volume of the book. It is written of me. I delight to do thy will. Oh, my power, yea, thy law is within my heart. It says, I delight to do thy will. Okay. So this should be a delight for us to do it, especially understanding how bogus we did the Lord. Okay. And understanding what we're deserving of. All right. So it's like, look, the least that you could do is have a love towards, your brother. All right. Look out for him. Lay down your life. Go after the example that I gave. Then I'll accept thee. Right. So we want to make sure that we're operating in that type of energy, man. All right. So let me finish out with this second Maccabees. All right. This is second Maccabees chapter 2 and verse 23. Second Maccabees 2 and 23. It says, all these things I say being declared by Jason of Cyrene in 5 books, we will essay to abridge in 1 volume. Right. So he was like, all right, we're going to summarize this book, of Jason of Cyrene. It says, for considering the infinite number and the difficulty which they find that desire to look into the narrations of the story for the variety of the matter. Verse 25, we have been careful that they that will read may have delight, and that they that are desirous to commit to memory might have ease, and that all into whose hands it comes might have profit. Therefore, to us that have taken upon us this painful labor of abridging, right? It was not easy, but a matter of sweat and watching. So they're going into the labor and effort, the attention to detail that they had in summarizing that book. All right. Going into, translating when you go into the prologue of Sirach. All right. The labor and effort that they had to have in carefully translating, from out of the Hebrew into another tongue and so on and so forth. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that was put in for us to even have these words in these last days, man. Okay. You could even go back into the history with King James, man. All right. When he appointed those, I forget how many it was. All right. Appointed all those men to translate the scriptures. Right. That was a lot of labor and effort that was put in. Okay. And that labor and effort has been shown throughout ages. All right. From our forefathers so that we can have this understanding, man. All right. We cannot lose sight of that, man. Starting off once again with the ultimate example being Yahawashi. So seeing that, how could you not requite that? How can we not have a mind frame of like, damn, man, look at what our forefathers sacrificed. Look at the effort that they put in to do all these things while we was all catching hell in our personal lives, dealing with different situations. All right. But really in the scriptures, you just read about the work that they did and that they put in. For the most part, we get different examples and glimpses of what was going on in Jake's personal lives at certain times and everything like that, with various prophets and, catching hell. Just even off of the fact of Micah, he said, I'll bear the indignation of the Lord because I've sinned against them. And then she that is mine enemy shall see it, shame shall cover her. What would cause a man to, pour out that in that writing? Okay. He caught some hell. We read it with Job, and the hell that he caught from his woman and Tobit, his woman in his ear and everything like that, just bringing up those examples. But there's plenty of other things, man. All right. Tobit, he was blind. I think it was for 8 years. You know what I'm saying? Paul had a thorn in his flesh, right? While he was still laboring, putting in that work. You know what I'm saying? Right? Mental battles that you was dealing with. All types of different things was going on in these men's lives while they were still laboring, putting in that work and that effort, all right, to deliver this message and deliver that assured hope, all right, for one another, man. Okay? So it says we come from a rich a rich history, all right, and we've got some mighty forefathers, all right, that really laid down their lives for the nation, man, all right? And it all starts off with the elect, who's actually going to receive these words and benefit from them because they're going to take heed unto it, man. It's going to profit those that actually apply it, like it says in that prologue of Sirach. But it says, therefore, to us that have taken upon us this painful labor of abridging, it was not easy, but a matter of sweat and watching, even as it is no ease unto him that prepareth the banquet and seeketh the benefit of others. Yet for the pleasuring of many, we will undertake gladly this great pains. So there's like, man, look, we're glad to stay up sleepless nights. In the GNT, I think it said tirelessly, right? How they labored, It's like, look, we kept it pushing, you know what I'm saying? And we're glad to do this. We're glad to sacrifice. We're glad to lose sleep. All right. Man, brothers that have been up breaking bread, meeting new brothers and everything like that, man, and stayed up breaking bread all night. Jake had to work in the morning, just getting off of work, hours, all right? Just to deliver this bread, this hope, to give understanding, phone calls for hours, counseling Jake through different things, okay? Lessons, going through history, you know what I'm saying? Digging up this, digging up that, carefully going, man, bro, Jake been putting in work, right? We have to have that, and despite everything else that they had to deal with in their personal lives, man, Jake just lost a job, man, all right? But it took 3 hours to put a lesson together, you know what I'm saying? Phone fucked up 5 times, all right? Then finally it came out. You don't see all the stuff that happens behind the scenes, you know what I'm saying? All right, you'll read those different Psalms. You wouldn't even consider certain times you could read about, okay, this is King David in the cave. He was on a run, and you can kind of piece different details together of what he was going through in his personal life as he was still writing those Psalms, and different things like that. But you don't see all those different things, man. All right. But those things happen. Okay. Health issues, I think it was Elisha. It was Elisha. He died of a disease, man. All right. He died of a disease, man. So he's dealing with different things. So all that to say this is that the love and the sacrifice that, Jake has put in, man, and that labor, and no matter what things were happening, all right, the true men of the Lord, man, they continue to press on and deliver the word. All right, and we're benefiting off of that till this day. To even the literal words out of the book that we read has been preserved through the Spirit and power of Yahawashi. All right, through men laboring and interpreting and passing it down and so on and so forth, man. Even when you read throughout Kings and Chronicles, all right, you'll read about, then a man of the Lord came and he found the book of the law. All right, they were burning our books. Jake would go off into idolatry, Then they had to recover the book, all right, to get back the way, Jake had to go into hiding in certain times in history, all right, and couldn't even profess themselves to be Israelites and, couldn't keep it, but they still labored and fought to maintain the heritage. Like, bro, throughout the ages, man, our forefathers fought for us to have this, man. Okay? We should be showing that energy and appreciation, to Yahawashi Yahawashi and having that mind frame for one another. But this is 2 Maccabees chapter 2. In verse, I'm going to read it in GNT. 2 Maccabees chapter 2. In verse, I'll start at verse 23. I will now try to summarize in a single book the 5 volumes written by Jason. The number of details and the bulk of material can be overwhelming for anyone who wants to read an account of the events. But I have attempted to simplify for all readers. Those who read for sheer pleasure will find enjoyment, and those who want to memorize the facts will not find it difficult. Writing such a summary is a difficult task, demanding hard work and sleepless nights. Okay? So Jake was up, all right, in captivities and catching hell and going through so on and so forth. Sleepless nights, interpreting, writing, laboring, giving out understanding, writing letters, traveling, you know what I'm saying? To build up the saints, all right, throughout the ages, to give this wisdom out. This is precious, man. All right, it says, but I've attempted to simplify for all readers. Those who read for sheer pleasure will find enjoyment, and those who want to memorize the facts will not find it difficult. Writing such a summary is a difficult task, demanding hard work and sleepless nights. It is as difficult as preparing a banquet that people of different tastes will enjoy. But I am happy to undergo this hardship in order to please my readers. All right. I will leave the matter of details. That's all I read in that, So he was like, look, yeah, man, it was sleepless nights and everything like that. And I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to lose sleep. I'm happy to do this so that it could benefit the next man. So that shows you the love, all right, that our forefathers had, throughout the ages, man, for one another. All right, for those that were seeking wisdom and knowledge and understanding. All right, even Ezra, he was like, man, all right, we got this word in this time now, but what about those that are going to come in the latter days? All right, they're going to need this understanding. They're going to need these words, right? So it was always a consideration of others. All right, so we got to make sure that we're not operating in a selfish mentality or a lack of appreciation towards this ministry and the labor of our forefathers, starting off with Yahawashi and the rest of the men that, fought to deliver this word and interpret it, give us proper understanding, and all these different things, man. All right, they sacrifice. Okay, so Lord's what I was edifying. I'm going to end it right there and give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahawashi, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations to the hope of the leg, pushing out this word in all sincerity and in truth. With that, I'm going to say shalom.